Stephanie Barnes, thank you so much for coming on to my chats around asking the hard questions, and this one with a business twist. And I love your interest in art and your whole interest in education from the root up, really. So you refer to yourself as Chief Chaos Organizer. So I love that alone. That holds promise for a great chat, you know?
It does, doesn't it?
So it's wonderful. Thank you so much. So tell us about yourself and how you got involved in this whole knowledge management area.
Oh, thanks. Well, and thank you for having me on. I'm happy to be here. So yeah, how did I get started in knowledge management? It was by accident. It's one of those things I just was like, what do you mean you don't have that? Back in the days when I was at Hewlett Packard, after I had done my MBA, and I had my undergrads in accounting, and in accounting we had always had checklists and had to reuse the files from the previous years and talk to the people that had done the audits and the tax returns of the year before, and collect all this information, and that was in the early 90s, and I get into HP at the end of the 90s, early 2000s, and I'm like, well, what do you mean we don't have checklists for this engagement, and we don't, and so yeah, I kind of, because I asked the question, I kind of evolved into this knowledge management role, and yeah, and I've been doing it since then, since like 1999, and it just has evolved.
And in this climate, I think becoming more and more pertinent, really, as the questions unfold now, we will arrive to that conclusion, I am sure. Yeah. Radical knowledge management is a concept. It may be new to some organizations. It may be new to some leaders who might be listening to this. So give us an overview of what Radical KM is all about.
So Radical KM is something I developed over the last 10 years. And so I have no doubt that it will be new for lots and lots of people that are watching this or listening to this. Mm-hmm. And it's the idea that we're missing something, that we as a society, especially a Western society or Western influenced society, is missing something. We've focused on efficiency and effectiveness and being rational and being logical, and excluded all this, all our creativity, because it's not a straight line. Creativity is a curved line, or many curved lines, and it's all interconnected. And so we have ignored that over the last hundreds or thousands of years, and focused on this rationality and an analytical approach to things. And so Radical KM is about bringing our creativity back and really going back to our roots, because our roots, especially our roots in learning, are around being playful and being creative and being curious. If you think about how children learn, it's through those things, not by sitting down with a textbook. They learn the textbook thing from the adults in the room.
Sure. I sort of have echoes of Taylorism and the conveyor belt and all of that from my occupational organizational psychology learning, Yeah. But the world at the minute is at a crossroads on many levels because of the COVID, etc. And it has caused people to think. Working from home has given them a chance to reevaluate and to seek out ways to find work-life integration. And they're now beginning to call it the Great Resignation, etc. Because people have suddenly woke up to what they had been maybe wasting their lives on in terms of the workplace. So you contend that the creativity has been educated out of us.
Oh yeah, but it's not just me. There's tons of people saying it. Ken Robinson is most famous probably for saying
he was so entertaining.
Yes. So,
and no doubt about it, in our system here in Ireland, we work very much to a point system. Everybody strives to get to university, and we brag about our percentage of youth who get to university, etc. And it's like putting round pegs into square holes,
Yeah, I'm really not convinced that everybody needs to go to university, but yet that is the gold standard. Which is unfortunate, because I think there's a lot of good and interesting jobs out there that don't require university education.
Absolutely. And very often people who graduate with certain parchment, they don't work to it at all. They actually revert organically to what they should have done in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, but you speak about the VUCA world, you know, this volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and the development in me seeks to turn it on its head and change it to vision, understanding, care, and action.
Oh,
So
I like that. I'm going to write that down later.
vision, understanding, care, and action. So now use your radical KM on that.
Well, I think that's perfect, because it has evolved it into and morphed it into what I'm really talking about with Radical KM, which is about being human and bringing the whole self to our workplaces, our organizations, and being more creative and curious and iterative and less concerned about the bottom line, and being more sustainable. And this is the thing with the creative behaviors, it enables sustainability. So it enables us to look at the big picture and to look at things differently and not be so focused on the bottom line, which is where we get into trouble. And the accountant in me, you know, hears me saying, don't focus on the bottom line. You know, the accountant is screaming, no, we have to focus on the bottom line. But there are other ways to be successful without focusing strictly on the bottom line and sustainability. And you see what's happened in the world around with pollution and global warming and all this. This is what's happened when we focus on the bottom line and we forget the other things, and the other things make us sustainable.
Yeah, and if you really think of high-powered C-suite, how much of themselves have they sacrificed or lost in order to retain this C-suite persona?
Yeah.
And, you know, Daniel Goleman would always say that self-awareness is the foundation stone of all the other emotional intelligences. And really, my bugbear is this whole thing, personnel selection and assessment, and how flippant we are in terms of selecting people for key roles. And if the wrong person is chosen, they can create disaster and create havoc in so many people's lives and in the work life and the culture of the organization. Yeah. It's time that we woke to this integration of the personal and the professional, and we come as the whole package into the workplace.
Yeah, and we look more at the core transferable skills. Those are the important skills, not whether somebody knows how to code. They can be taught how to code. And they can be taught how the core transferable skills or soft skills as well. But those are so much more important, honestly, than the hard skills, the more tangible skills. Sure. But we shy away from them because, well, I don't know, because they're soft, and so we don't understand them, and because they aren't a straight line. And
soft is a misnomer, really. Soft it sort of has connotations of the fluffy, and what we could dispense with, really. But really, it's the baseline, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. You can have somebody that can't code or can't do, you know, accounting, and you can train them for that. But if they're not self-aware and they don't have those communication skills and that openness and the curiosity, that's a lot harder to learn. And will ruin a team, will ruin an organization very quickly.
So really, where's the starting point? Surely the starting point is from cradle to grave. Surely the starting point is within the education system and the training of our young.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely critical that creativity is taken more seriously in education. But we've also got this whole workforce, you know, anybody over 18, you know, that's out in the world already. We need to educate those. We can't wait for, you know, a couple of generations to work their way through the workforce and to bring creativity and to change our organizations. We've got to start.
And they in turn are the mums and dads of the future. So what do they do in their homes? So there's got to be a whole sea change.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? But rightly or wrongly, we talk about the snowflake generation. And I often argue that we're teaching our young the language of anxiety, which coincides with the VUCA notion, etc. How do we extinguish fear, which I think is the fuel that perpetuates this VUCA world?
Well, we got to make things more open and give people the skills and the confidence to be curious and to accept that there isn't necessarily a right answer. In fact, I would say in a lot of cases, unless we're talking about math, maybe, you know, there isn't a right answer, at least not an absolute right answer. There are shades of a right answer, and there's what's right for the individual or for the organization, given a set of contexts and circumstances. And so it's about, and this is where the creativity and those skills come in, is because you can learn those behaviors and that attitude through creativity, by tapping into your inner artist, by tapping into your inner creative.
So there's connotations of a fluid, ongoing journey of discovery. Yeah. So that there are no ready-made answers, but we're always working towards, which gives the little giddy feeling of hope that you arrive at a new vista, really.
Yeah, well, and that curiosity of what's going to happen if I do this, you know,
yes.
rather than a sense of dread of, oh, I don't know what's going to happen when I do.
And then that sort of equates also with the courage for risk taking, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah. So let's momentarily view work through the lens maybe of Gen Z, Alpha, Millennials. They say, 70% of the world's workforce by 2029 is going to be made up of these generations.
Okay.
Now, in your view, have they been adequately or appropriately educated for the post-COVID world, which is a whole world of uncertainty, change, and they may work at 10 or 15 different things across their lifespan?
Yeah.
Are they ready for it? Or are they soft?
Some of them, yes, but there's an awful lot of them that I talk to that are looking for the right answer, want the book, want the article, want this. They don't want to discover the answer for themselves. They're not curious enough. They just want somebody to tell them the answer, because somebody's always told them the answer. There's always been a book to go to. There's always been a teacher that's going to tell them, or a professor that's going to tell them what the right answer is. And so there isn't this curiosity about, well, I don't know what the right answer is, but I'm going to go and find out.
Sure. And maybe that takes me to my next question. Our young are consumed by technology, social media, the web, etc. Indeed, we're told that data is the new oil of the 21st century, right?
Sure.
So the mobile phone has become a distractor and indeed a crutch. But to my mind, and from my background as an educator, there's a certain robbery from organic creativity in all of it. And there's a certain, I know I referenced Marianne Wolf's book, Reader Come Home. And I think she gets it all in one. There's a certain inability anymore to question, to critique, and to formulate opinion. Solid opinion. And we've even seen that in the silence with which lockdowns, etc., have been met right across the world. Our young were content with their screens. What do you say to that in terms of your knowledge management mindset?
Yeah, I think you're right. The technology, my MBA is in technology, but technology is a tool. There's a time and a place for technology.
Sure.
And yeah, I think people are very content with their screens, which is unfortunate and distracting and doing all kinds of things to our brain and how our brains work. And, and I won't go into all of that, but,
sure.
But yeah, there's definitely some problems there. And that goes back to what we were just talking about a minute ago, and always wanting to know the answer. Oh, well, I don't know the answer. I'm just going to Google it. Sure. And I'm guilty of that too. But sometimes it's good to find out the answer for yourself. And even if when you Google it, you have to have the critical thinking that says, oh, who's written this? Who owns this website? Is this a trusted source? Is this a credible source? Should I be believing what's on this? And there's this acceptance of, oh, well, it's on the web, it must be true. Sort of like
and that is a worry for the future with our young. It's a real worry, because I know that there's one sentence that Marianne Wolf uses, and it really struck home with me. Across every age will skimming become the new norm that short circuits the time needed for inferential thinking, critical analysis, reflection, and empathy, the core elements of any democracy. And when it gets that deep, it gets serious, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
So alternatively viewed then, would you argue that a radical KM has taken on a new urgency and importance as a result of the immersion in IT and dependence on IT? I love your notion of, when you're training, you get into the art and not just clicking a button online, you get into the art. Talk to me a little about that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's embodied learning is so important. We don't just learn with our heads, we learn with our bodies. And so this is part of why I do art in my workshops and in my classes, and we do painting, we do drawing, we do, all kinds of different things. But we use paint, and we use canvas, or we use pencils and crayons and things to draw, and we don't use some online app, because part of it is that I don't want the technology to be a barrier. Everybody can pick up a pencil or a pencil marker or something and draw on a paper. Figuring out how the technology works can be a barrier for some people. So, and it can get in the way of the experience. The other thing with the technology is people can hit undo. So if you get brown in your yellow, oh no, I've got brown in my yellow. I hit undo, the brown's not in the yellow anymore. But if you put brown in your yellow paint, there's no undo button. There's okay, I got brown in my yellow paint. What am I going to do now? How do I move forward from this point on? Because it's out there, it's done. And if you're not careful, you're going to make a bigger mess of it, than just having a dot of brown in the yellow, or, whatever the situation is. And so, not having that undo button, having to learn and experience that resilience of going, oh, okay, I'm not going to be able to do what I thought I was going to do. How do I go forward?
Get around it.
And that's a lesson not just for art, but for life.
So it's problem solving at its best, isn't it?
Yeah.
You remind me of a little boy once who was showing off his reading skill to me. And the teacher said, now just watch him when he comes to the end of the page. And he came to the end of the page and he started sliding. And he said, it won't move. He thought he was on screen. He thought he could slide. He was mixed in his, and he was only 7, 8. And he says, it won't move. It won't move. And it was a real collision of the traditional with the new, and the dependence on screen, and the dependence at that early age on being able to slide the screen. But so how do we ensure then that technology and art complement and support each other, as opposed to dominate and suppress natural or organic creativity, as I call it?
We keep the technology out of the classrooms, which is not going to be a popular thing for me to say. I understand, but we need to learn the basics. Kids need to learn the basics before they'll pick up the technology. They're going to be immersed in the technology outside of the classrooms. The classroom should be for learning the basics and learning some of those soft skills, those core transferable skills that we were talking about.
Sure.
And learning how to think critically and creatively, and so
it's hard for us coming equipped with that traditional foundation laying. It's hard for us to even imagine the world of the child of today, who is working in the absence of that backdrop of having done deep learning, etc. But you talk about then the connection between sustainable and artistic behavior. And speak to us a little about that and how that translates really on the ground.
That was so interesting when I made that connection. I have been working with some folks here in Germany on a translation of a book called the Creative Company, and that's all about what we can learn from artists in our organizations.
Sure.
And it looks at arts-based initiatives or interventions, and then someone else asked me to speak about sustainable leadership and gave me some context and things. And I looked at this list of sustainable leadership behaviors, and I'm like, hold on here. All of these behaviors are things that we learned from artists, from this book that I was just, working on editing and translating. And that was honestly how I made the connection. It's like, it's interesting. I couldn't find anybody that was actually saying the same thing. So of course I questioned my own sanity for making this connection. Until a few months ago, I came across some academics that have written a paper about just that, how sustainable leaders, sustainable leadership can be enhanced and learned through creativity. And they use the example of photography, because they did work around people in their phone cameras, because that was easy and accessible. But it's the same idea. It's about creativity.
Sure. So it's applying artistic attitudes and practices to the challenges, resulting in a culture of creativity, variety, purpose, autonomy, and elasticity in the norm. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
and being playful and being reflective about things, and curious, that perceiving, what happened and why did that happen, and what's the feedback loop. Look at the feedback loop.
And surely it breaks down barriers too in the workplace, doesn't it? It gets people talking, and it gets people feeling okay about being vulnerable.
It does. It opens up curiosity and builds trust and all those kinds of things that are so important in our organizations.
Yeah. So how do we then focus less on databases and documents as enablers of knowledge management and more on continuous learning? The future of learning, any place, anytime, anywhere, right across the lifespan. But I would hope with the original, let's say, that the base skills laid down, and the people are equipped then to move with equal opportunity through that space.
Yeah. And it's through slowing down, and making space for creativity and for being curious and for doing some of these little activities. And they don't have to be big interventions. I mean, I love my painting activities, don't get me wrong, but they take some time and they're messy and, and all of that. And I appreciate that. But we can do little things that bring some creativity and some space in. Just a 2-minute guided meditation or 3-minute guided meditation at the beginning of a meeting, or a little scribble drawing activity that I do, or, some different quick little drawing activity, or making sculpture out of the stuff that you have on your desk. It doesn't have to be big and complicated. I think we have a tendency to make these things bigger and more complicated than they really need to be. And they can be, like I say, I like my painting activities. I like the whole idea of having a studio in the workplace and having that as a place for people to come in and collaborate and do team building stuff and do innovation and come up with new solutions. But it doesn't have to be like that. You can do it in small ways too. And the small ways are often a good way to get started.
And when you think of the workplace of the past, we were always time pressed.
Yeah.
And that whole thing of, we haven't got to get the job done, let's move, and there's no time. Even now, they would say in the workplace, there's less time for interaction, for the chat, where a lot of things were teased out. And if you're thinking of the new hybrid work arrangements, or even working from home, there's got to be a certain loss from the culture of a workplace in all of that, ultimately. And it will come home to roost sometime.
It will. We're not computers. We're not, machines. We're humans are about relationship and being social, and knowledge is about being social. And then there's a lot of knowledge that gets passed, around the coffee machine. And I have worked remotely and virtually for 20 years, and it can work really well. But I'm, if we have the opportunity to meet in person, then we should meet in person. But in the absence of being able to do that, we can do a lot of stuff remotely, and for the sake of our health and safety, we need to do more of that and consider and more, and it's healthier for the planet because we don't have all these people commuting and all of that kind of stuff. So
there's a certain wisdom and a certain convenience in it all. But I am a great believer in the power of intergenerational learning in the workplace and the passing on of that wisdom, etc. And we need to make time for that, don't we?
Absolutely. We need time. We need more time. We need to slow down to speed up.
Absolutely. Now, so speak to me a little around art as a metaphor. You referred to in your paper, but to art as a metaphor, a vehicle to aid people's understanding of ideas and processes around curiosity and iteration, as well as desirable and sustainable behaviors. What happens in an art-based initiative?
So when I do the layered painting activity in my workshops or my classes, it is about being curious. What happens when I mix these two colors? What happens when I use this tool? What happens? I often get the question of, well, what happens if I mix these two colors? And I will say, try it and see. I could tell you what's going to happen because I know, because I've probably done it myself. But try it and see what happens, or try it and see. You've had this question, try it and see, find your own answer. So it comes back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, being curious and finding your own answer. Don't rely, on some YouTube video to show you. You need to have that experience, and that embodied. So this is where it comes in.
And knowing that you have that lovely combination of business and art, are you ever tempted then to extrapolate to what happens when we put Mary and Jane working together?
Of course. Well, that's part of the discussion after the painting, is how this does apply in our work settings. What curiosity, what questions has this raised, about that spreadsheet that you were working on, or that slide deck, or that collaboration you were working on. Yeah. So
and I suppose the capacity to actually fail and start all over again, which is the essence of resilience, isn't it?
It is. And I actually don't like using the word failure, because I think if we've learned something, then it's not really a failure, because we've learned something. So
we've moved into the age of uncertainty, and I think it's here to stay.
Oh, absolutely.
What added value comes from the art-based initiatives in the workplace in this era of uncertainty? And I suppose another way of looking at it, how do we acclimatize to uncertainty and ensure that our young have the grit and the spunk to go at it, notwithstanding the uncertainty of it all?
Yeah, well, and I think the painting activity that we were just talking about is good for helping people get more comfortable with the uncertainty, because I think you're right, it's here to stay. And the truth is that nothing was ever really certain. We just had this idea that it was. And so, with the speed of change now, it's just become much more obvious that there is no such thing as certainty. And so that painting exercise that we were talking about, and that what happens if, that gets people more comfortable with the idea of the question is more important than the answer. And so this is where creativity comes in. What happens if I do this with my pen, in this scribble drawing? What happens if I use the crayon this way, or the marker this way? Or, can I balance these two objects on top of themselves and make a sculpture out of the stuff on my desk? Or, what happens if I do some improvisation activities sometimes. And so what happens if I say this word first instead of this word, and watching how that goes and iterating, and then, that it almost it becomes fun to see how things change when you change one of the variables. And so that becomes, so then uncertainty just becomes a big game. And I'm going to change this variable this time and see what happens, if it's going to get me a step closer or a step farther away from where I wanted to be.
Yeah, it's very interesting, very interesting. So in viewing the use of art for transformation and learning, speak to me about knowledge creation as an aspect of knowledge management.
Yeah, so knowledge creation, there's different phases of knowledge management, and a lot of organizations have focused on that storage and that the processes around it rather than the front end piece and the creation, because the creation can be oftentimes uncertain, like we've just been talking about, and open-ended and full of space and not particularly concrete, and people get uncomfortable with the state, that state of being that openness and that I don't know what's going to happen. And so radical knowledge management and bringing creativity in helps to not fill up the space, but make people more comfortable with the space,
less fearful,
less fearful and more curious about it rather than being afraid of it. So
sure. So bringing the threads of your thinking together, let's envision a typical organization, maybe public sector, where two sections of an organization, they lack collaboration and knowledge sharing, and they tend to work in a silo mentality and there are internal rivalries. How might you tackle that situation to dislodge their stuck state, as it were, to bring them to a point of enlightenment and readiness to move on and to work together?
Yeah, creating a studio space, a design space for them to come together and collaborate and work together in a kind of a framework, have it facilitated, have someone there, that an artist or a business person or someone that's skilled in those things, in art and business and facilitation and asking questions and getting people, breaking down the barriers and have them working together to find a solution. So facilitating a workshop or a week-long kind of session to team build and to open up communication channels and to break down some of the walls and those kinds of
And have you ever found a situation where you've actually sown the seeds where that has continued and that type of pilot became a model that became integral and embedded in the organization?
Yeah, there's a couple of organizations that I know of that are working on that, or have taken that on and are moving just slowly but surely to in that direction of bringing creativity in and bringing radical KM in and making that part of the organization so that they are engaging the whole person. And
sure. So you would act as a consultant and a reference point for guiding them.
Yeah, as a coach, as a mentor, as a facilitator, as a consultant. Yeah, absolutely.
So we all hear of the change adverse organizations. The traditional, you don't want to change.
No one wants to change. Well, except for me, apparently, because I'm a change junkie. But
so how do you tackle that type of organization?
It takes a lot of communication and finding people that are, you have your early adopters so find those people that are willing to give it a try and are curious, and then communicating out the successes and the failures. You have to be transparent and accountable and authentic and all these things in this, but communicate it out. And a lot of it's about timing, honestly. And so just keep at it, little bits, one step at a time, adding people in as they become interested and curious. And I think about, some work that I did at Hewlett Packard when I was there before I went out as an independent consultant, that I had this team that were just not going to participate in the knowledge management activities that we were rolling out. And so I left them alone. I had tons of people that were way more interested and engaged and not giving me a hard time. So I left this one team, alone. About a year and a half later, they came back to me and like, are you still doing that? The situation with their manager, their budget had got cut and they needed to still be able to deliver the things that they needed to deliver for their clients. And I said, yeah, sure. We've just finished a very similar project with a data center in Melbourne in Australia. These guys were in the States, in the US. And so I connected them, and they came back, the guy in the States came back to me and said, this is perfect. This is exactly what we need. And so we had a solution for him in a matter of weeks, because we were able to build on what we had done for the Australian team. And then this guy became my biggest proponent, you know, for what we were doing with knowledge management. And he's like, everybody should be doing this. If you're not doing this, you're doing it wrong. You got to get on knowledge management train. And yet I know if I had forced him, you know, 18 months previous, when I had first approached him, he would have trashed what we were doing, you know, 18 ways to Sunday. But by waiting, focusing on people that wanted to do it, 18 months later, he was ready to come on and became my biggest salesperson.
It's all about timing, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
And did you do that with the convenience of technology? You did it from afar, virtually?
Yeah. I was in Toronto at that point, and he was in the States, and then the other team was in Australia. So yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? So I suppose my final question would inevitably bring me around to, how can we capitalize on technology while using it as the tool, while from as early a stage as possible, inculcating this notion of an appreciation of our own natural artistic bent? Yeah,
I think by using technology to, just as we're doing here, you know,
as the
technology is facilitating our conversation, and you know, and discovering things about Radical KM, but it's not the whole purpose, and it's much more about the relationship building and making the space to do that. And so yeah,
there's a space there for heightening awareness of those in positions of influence to bring that home and teach digital literacy from an early stage.
Yes. Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And hold on to what we have, and that whole differentiator between the human and AI, that ability to empathize and all, must be augmented.
Well, and this is the thing, that AI, everybody gets all excited about AI, but humans, the difference between humans and AI is AI doesn't do creativity. Humans are creative. And so we really need to tap into that and build that strength, because the technology can do the stuff that's not creative. And it does it very well. It does it better than humans do it. And so that's fine. But then humans need to do what they do well, which is creativity.
And we run the risk of denying ourselves the abundance we should be enjoying.
Absolutely.
Unless we just grasp the moment now. So that, to me, should be the great reset, the reawake thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So finally, will you take this opportunity to explain to our listeners the course that's upcoming, that you're going to provide to anybody around the world who might be interested in signing up?
Yeah, so we're doing that again in March. I'm doing it with the Knowledge Management Institute they're based in Washington, but we do it in 4 half days. We do it virtually on Zoom, and yeah, we learn about all the concepts that I have just been talking about. So it's 3 in the afternoon in Berlin for 4 hours till 7 o'clock. So hopefully that works
on 4 half days.
On 4 half days of Monday, Wednesday, and Monday, Wednesday, in the middle of March. And yeah, we'll paint and we'll draw and we'll do some storytelling, and we'll talk about knowledge management and how to make our organizations creative and resilient. And yeah, we'll have a good time.
And it's important to emphasize, you don't have to be an artist, and you don't have to be good at art to paint and draw.
Oh, no.
That's the thing that might prevent people from doing.
Definitely not. You do not need to be, you should not be an artist, actually. No, yeah, definitely not.
And where is best to find the information about your course?
They can contact me or go to the Knowledge Management, Google Knowledge Management Institute. And the course is called Creative KM, Creative Knowledge Management, and it's one of their certified knowledge specialist courses. So,
well, it certainly has grabbed my attention, and it really is an area I would love to delve more into. And maybe it suits you. You just fit it. You fit it. You're
I think
just
so.
colorful. You're open to possibility, and you've got a beautiful mind. I just love the whole area. So thank you so much for coming on, asking the hard questions, and hopefully the first of many interactions.
I hope so. Thank you for having me. It's been lovely.